Welcome back to another episode of our series, Running the Wasatch 100. I am so tickled this morning. I'm just catching my breath because I'm trying to keep up with this guy. But anyway, I am so tickled for our special guest. I'd say a few of you probably recognize him from his 2018 Podium Wasatch finish. However, probably more of you are recognizing him from his back-to-back first place championship at the American Fork, Utah West Stake of Zion and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints 5K 2021 and 2022, Mr. Brian Robbins.
Hey everybody, it's Scott.
Hey, I think I'm gonna walk this section.
Okay.
All right, Brian. First question I have for you. Can you give us something you absolutely nailed with your Wasatch? Your first Wasatch or Wasatch in general?
Yeah, hopefully this is not too long-winded, but my very first Wasatch was the best running day of my life. And just about everything went right. Almost everything went right. And I think I owe that to, there was a level of respect I carried for the distance, 100 miles, the course, obviously. I knew it was tough sledding on the Wasatch course. And then the race in and of itself. I have immense respect and awe and have always known and loved the Wasatch 100 even before I ran. Growing up, I knew about it. And I had such a respect and furthermore a reverence for the race that it allowed me to prepare for Wasatch in such a way that I was ready and I felt ready at the start line. I knew I needed everything in my favor. I ate like an Olympian. I trained like I'd never trained for anything in my life. I knew I wasn't scared of it. I just respected it. And then on race day, that came in handy, and I ultimately had like a day. And Mark Robbins, my brother, will always talk about the usefulness of gratitude, but it just created a day where I was grateful to just even be running the whole day, and that carried me with like, it would have been anybody's dream day. And I think what I nailed was respecting and honoring that race by preparing in such a way that I was able to move all day long and hit my goal. And that right there, it's hard to beat that. That was what I nailed.
I'd like you to tell us your biggest fail or something that going into Wasatch that you learned a lesson that you're going to change and that you will change moving forward.
Oh yeah, it's like right along the lines of what I just said, where I had such a good day and kind of unconsciously did everything right at my first Wasatch. And it just came to me. It was like a gift from running to me. And then I took that, I far exceeded my expectations, and then it kind of changed my mentality. I wouldn't say it made me cocky or overconfident, but maybe just a little bit. And the very next year, I signed up again, except this time, I felt like I was in a position to win the race. And I made that my goal. I said, I'm gonna win the race, which I knew was a silly goal because, I don't know, you kind of get stuck in this philosophy of whether you should just run your race. There's a lot of things you can't control. You can't control who shows up or whatever. But it just made sense to me that the next thing to do was win the race. And I tried to come up with a plan to do that. It's like I need to run it in a certain amount of time. I need to train in a certain amount of way. And in doing that, it was as if I cast aside everything that I did right the year before, which was respect the race. To me, it was as if the 100 miles was a formality. It was just a matter of whether I could do it in 20 hours or not. And Wasatch kind of beat me up for that. And when something went wrong, which inevitably things go wrong at a 100-mile distance, I wasn't expecting it. It was never part of the plan. It was like, not to personify Wasatch, but it was as if Wasatch was like, hey man, you got to run this race. And it's not easy. You don't get to just go scamper to a win. My stomach turned at like mile 35. I started puking and I was done. I hadn't planned on having anything go wrong. And when it did, because I didn't respect the race or the distance, I got shut down so hard and did a sad, sad walk from Lambs Canyon to where I'd ultimately DNF, my only DNF ever at Brighton. And it was far from my goal. It was as far from my goal as you could be of winning the race. And it was just a lack of respect, of forgetfulness. That,
if I said, Brian, we got all these new Wasatchers, and what piece of advice would you give them going into the race? They've got 5-6 months to go. Maybe they only have a few, but what advice would you give them? There's one piece of advice.
You shouldn't be doing this. And I don't mean that to be facetious or funny, but really your body shouldn't run 100 miles and you shouldn't climb 28, 26, however many thousand feet. People hear you do it, they think you're crazy. You shouldn't be able to do it, but you can do it, obviously. Hundreds of people do it every year. And just with that in mind, know that you shouldn't be doing it. So put everything in your favor. Have that respect, that reverence, that humility for the race. Make that your forefront, that it's the Wasatch is in charge. And so put everything in your favor to be able to work with the Wasatch to get you finished.
The topic for today is respecting the race, respecting your training, respecting the distance, just having a respect, and as Brian brought in, a reverence for what you're going to be doing. Reverently, quietly, softly as they sing to me. Reverently, quietly, softly sing the melody. Reverently, quietly, humbly now. It's getting sacrilegious now.
We sing to thee.
Brian Robbins, what does that mean to you? I know you've already said a little bit of this, but respecting the race.
Okay, obviously the distance is something to respect. The course is something to respect. But I honestly look at the Wasatch 100 as the entity that it is. It's almost as if it's this looming elder statesman in the community. You can say what you will about the race, the changes they should make and should not make, and whatever, but it's always been here, and it's in our backyard, and it commands respect. And if you don't give it to it, you're effed. You won't do well there. You can't underestimate it. You need to return the respect that it deserves. I remember one training run that I did leading up to the Wasatch that did more good for me than any other training run I did. And I would recommend something similar to anybody that's getting ready for Wasatch. But I jumped in one day with Matt Zabriskie, who was also running the race, and he basically created a course for us that would take all of the most difficult aspects of Wasatch and put it right on our lap. And it taught me how to muscle through that. We started at the Lambs Canyon aid station, and this was like 10:30 in the morning on a hot summer day, really hot. And there was no coolness of the morning or anything, so we're getting the full serving of sun and heat. And we ran backwards up the course to Big Mountain, which is approximately
14,
12, 13, 14 miles. Yeah. Turned around and ran back down the trail back to Lambs, recreating that section of the race. It's known as the Devil's Armpit. It's hard. It's everybody's least favorite part. It's gross. And I got about 5-6 miles from finishing that run and thought to myself, well, Wasatch is going to be a huge failure because I can't even do this. And I got way past my breaking point, got so sick, was puking, dehydrated, and then had to muscle my everything to get back to the car where Matt was waiting for me, asked if everything was okay, and I just told him, yeah, everything's fine except for that I'm not going to run Wasatch because I can't even do this run. And he laughed and reminded me that it's a whole different story. Race day, there'll be aid stations, there'll be this, that, and the other. But it took me to the brink and killed me. And I submit, if you don't have a day like that training, you gotta have a day like that. Not only where you create a difficult challenge for you, but one that you lose. You need to take that loss. You need to get beat up, and then it comes back to pay off when you actually are at the race. All right, so with this talk about respecting the race, I feel like it's a huge motivator for your training, and it helps the training take care of itself. But specifically, I've had a couple of things thrown out to me that I agree with, but you gotta run, you gotta put in the miles, and they gotta be, a lot of those have to be running miles. Somebody once mentioned to me the magic number is 1,500, and that means starting January 1st on a year you're running the Wasatch. By the time you get to the start line in September, you should have run 1,500 miles. And that's not a hard, fast rule, but it does seem to be a magic number, and it's actually not that audacious of a number. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of around
Hi there.
40 miles a week on average, and that fluctuates. Obviously you'll have some bigger weeks, some recovery weeks, but there's that, and there's 250,000 feet of elevation gain that you couple with that, and that's a good formula. But with that, anything extra you can do gives you an edge. I mixed in weight training, and I don't know what people think about weight training and running, but all it did was help me. And it wasn't a huge weight training regimen. It was a couple days a week mixed in with my running, and it made all the difference. It just strengthens your stability, actually helps prevent injuries, and it's just another drop in the bucket towards the investment that you have at this race. Craziest thing about Wasatch is technically it's the end of summer, but closer to fall, and it's at high elevation a lot of times. But I'll be damned if it's not the hottest race you'll run all year. You go through that stretch of heat that you nearly can't ever prepare for. Your body doesn't ever want it, especially when it's laboring through a 100-mile race. And it's got to be respected, and you got to do everything you can to combat that, whether it's just ice down your shirt, around your neck, obviously plenty of fluids. If there's ever an opportunity to take a soak in a stream, or the miracle of a kiddie pool that might be at an aid station, you gotta drench off, you gotta cool down.
Ultra running stew.
Yes.
That's like the DNA bath
Forget
that people just dream about, that kind of thing, right?
Forget about the 34 people that got ahead of you.
I mean, what are you getting? You're getting like DNA, salt, probably some skin, probably a bunch of sweat.
All of the
grime,
gross things that come off of human sweat.
I don't even want to go any further, but there's probably more grime.
Matter.
Yeah, so hopefully they'll have the pool, the kiddie pool. Actually, since they moved that aid station, they haven't had the pool.
No.
So you're not going to find any water. There's not going to be any water.
No, not unless you cross the stream with lambs or wherever else, Mill Creek. Don't bank on it. The very best parts of Wasatch, and by best, whatever metrics you want to discuss, whether it's scenery, runability, like single track trails, arguably better than any race there is. Like beautiful, scenic, iconic. Whereas on the flip side, the worst parts of Wasatch, by the same metrics, are worse than almost any race out there.
100 miles of heaven and hell.
There you go.
Yeah. So speaking of the worst parts of Wasatch, one thing that has come up is the hornets. So somebody on Facebook asked about this. And so Brian, what's your experience with the hornets at the race?
So hopefully you're not allergic, because I submit that they could potentially be performance enhancing. There I was. I had just met for the first time a gentleman named Brandon Dace. And it was early at the race, and we were climbing up Bear Canyon in the dark. We were chatting, getting acquainted, like you do when you're trail running with somebody new. And come around the corner, not really paying attention to where I was stepping, until I looked down and my feet, my right foot, felt something weird. And it was smack dab in the middle of a dinner plate size pile of bees, yellow jackets, hornets, whatever. It was the most of those bugs I've ever seen in one place. And it was me and Brandon, some other guy, and it caused a sting fest. I got stung 3 times in the legs. Brandon got stung several times, and the guy behind us kept getting stung. It looked like a scene from the movie Platoon, where they walked out into an open field and all of a sudden started taking enemy fire. And we were just using every swear word there was, trying to beat these bees off, sprinting up the trail, using way too much energy to get away from them. But it came back. I feel like I said, as long as you're not allergic, they probably get some of their energy, and it's performance enhancing. Luckily I wasn't tested after the race.